Okay.
Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Cafe Kubal studios. Happy to be here with you. And we are picture in picture with Andrea Smith. Opportunity to have her on the show here today. A fitness instructor of over 15 years, a marketing manager as well, has worked with Body Armor and has done a lot of incredible things. We linked up on social media because of her positivity, which goes a long way, especially in today's world. Andrea, how are you?
I am good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, where did all of this get started that you wanted to not only care about healthy mind, healthy body, but that you wanted to share that with other people?
Yeah, I mean, I always, growing up, I was a cheerleader, I was a dancer, like all competitive though. So I think I've always had kind of a drive to um constantly like push myself. I was always, no matter what team I was on growing up, it seemed like I always kind of migrated towards like the leadership role on the team, even if it wasn't named that by the coach or whatever. It just seemed like I was kind of becoming the leader at a very young age. And I'm into astrology personally, and I'm an Aries, so I feel like it's a perfect fit for that personality. But I just always was into it. And what happened was when I got out of high school and college, I really missed that performance aspect of what I was doing with competitive stuff. And fitness was a very natural evolution for me. I was a runner at that time, and I remember somebody was like, "You should, come take this cycle class." And that's right when spinning first took off.
Yeah.
The early 2000s. And I ended up getting certified in it right off the bat. And I love music, so I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be great." And honestly, I just did not have the confidence. At like 19 years old, I was just here. I'd gotten this certification, and it was probably 3 years later till I ever taught my first class. And it was one of those things where somebody canceled, and I had a playlist, and I was like, well, I'll just do it. And
Sure.
anyway, that's kind of how the history of that goes. But I have been heavily into fitness since that time. And I'll tell you what, out of all the things that I do every day, I always joke with my class that when I teach a class in the morning, that it starts off on such a high and then my day just goes downhill after that. It's like the energy of people and everybody is looking to you for guidance. You know what I mean? And like, and another thing too, I think about a lot with this is that you don't know what's going on in somebody's life,
Yeah.
and sometimes the best thing in their whole day is that they scheduled 45 minutes of their time to come into your class. And I that is not lost on me. I'm always extremely grateful that people choose me to whatever let them forget what's going on in their day if it's bad. You know what I mean? So I try to maintain that, and like I said, remember to be grateful that I have that opportunity and to always share that. But listen, I have bad days too, and I'm not afraid to keep it real with people and tell people, like, listen, I'm having a bad day, but in the next 45 minutes, it's going to get better.
Yeah, and it's something that I took when I worked for other people and now owning my business of over 10 years, that reality of being on stage, right?
Yeah.
So no matter how bad your day is, I'm always a real person. I am who I am on the air, off the air. People that know me know that there's no persona or, that's taken when I'm on the air, but you have those moments where you want to share with people and say, "Listen, I've been there, but this is where we're going to go." And I think
Yeah.
you share a lot in your social media to people worldwide. It's something that I appreciate and respect, and that is the fact that you're very real about, hey, this is how I feel in this moment. This is what's going on in my life or maybe going on in your life, but you always spin it to a positive. Something that I find incredibly important, and on Instagram, I try to do it in my stories, is whenever I write a quote that is from me, I sign it and I
Yep.
sign each of those individually. You've put out a lot of information as well. Why do you find it important to be the inspiration and not just share what somebody else wrote, but to find something yourself that's maybe affecting you that day that you share with people? Why do you want to be the source of inspiration?
Yeah, I think you called it though, like with it could be affecting you that day at that moment. You know what I mean? Like I think as a kid, there was a time in my life that I wanted to be a writer. There was a time in my life, I wrote songs when I was a kid. I couldn't sing at all, but for whatever reason, thought I was going to be on Star Search. You know what I mean? Like I had this vision, and I've always I feel like expressed myself in a writing way. I mean, when blogging first came out, like I was kind of into that when it first happened. So uh I don't know. I mean, I just think like if I'm feeling this way, somebody else probably is feeling this way and maybe needed to see this. And it's funny because I'll share something and sometimes I'm even like just sharing to share. It's something I like. And then I'll get a comment. It's like, oh my God, I needed this today. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I did it now. Because sometimes I'm like, are you oversharing? Are you sharing too much? People are going to get weird ideas about your life if it's something negative. And that's the thing. I think it's also important that people know that you don't have to be this perfect family catalog looking influencer all the time. Like you can also put out there that like, hey, somebody treated me bad today and I'm not going to let it get to me. They're going to regret that one day or whatever. Like if you want to have a little bit of a day you feel sassy, share it. If you
Yeah.
want to have a day you want to be into more spiritual stuff, share it. It's like whatever I'm kind of vibing with at that day is kind of what I'll put out there. And I think there's always somebody that needs to hear it. There's always somebody that finds that you may be what you put out there. 100 people could not care, but
Yeah.
one person might change the way they look at something that they're going through. And I think that's the power of social media in general. That's the plus to social media.
Yeah. I mean, it was always meant, in my opinion, to bring us together, not divide us more.
Yeah.
And I feel like people, I mean, anything in this world, and I say this all the time, anything that's created can be used for a good or a bad thing, even at its most basic. And I said, even a toothpick, right? You use it to pick something out of your teeth to
Yeah.
grab an hors d'oeuvre, but you can also poke someone's eye with the toothpick. So,
Exactly.
social media, in the same respect, going off of that, how do you keep it real in the social media world where so many things are fabricated?
Well, I don't think a lot before I post. I do not plan out, influencers in general. I mean, it's a job for them. I mean, for me, I have a full-time job, so it's like this is more of like my fun creative outlet.
Yeah.
So I just post whatever I'm feeling. I mean, in the morning, I feel like it's important to show like positive, like getting up, starting your day, like getting your workout in. I find that working out in the morning is important because if I don't, the day starts to catch up with me. I start losing space, losing time. Um, I honestly think that's it. I don't think about it. Like, I'm not the kind of person that posts like the 3 or 4 beautiful pictures and beautiful reels every week. You know what I mean? I am like every single day I post because I feel like posting.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is probably the only thing that gives me that real factor. I think to some people is that it's not over what would be the word I was looking for? I guess over our the artistic side of influencers work, like the over photographed piece. I mean, you see like I'm in my home gym and it's like very gritty, dirty. It's not this beautiful world of Instagram pictures for me.
Well, and the thing is, I think that, we realize those of us that are actually doing the real thing and not just
Yeah.
talking about something, you could take a picture in a beautiful gym with a ton of makeup on,
Yeah.
or, accent yourself in lighting, so, to show muscles a certain way. But the reality of it all is the nitty gritty of it is when you're in a gym and you're sweating and you're feeling, I mean, anytime that I've done, I did this walk thing that just became part of my life every day, at least 10,000 steps a day, healthy
Mm-hmm.
mind, healthy body, healthy body, healthy mind. And I kept saying that. And I would go out and I would take pictures amidst it all. It's 91 degrees outside and I'm sweating. And I was like, I'm going to show you, like, this is who I'm about to take a shower. Like, this is what it looks like. This is real life. In today's world, there's so many things out there that look perfect, but that person is not being honest. Why are you so honest? Why are you so real? And why are you unafraid to share that realness with people?
I mean, listen, I'm human. I look at other people's pages and their pictures and I think to myself like, I wish I had time to do these beautiful backdrops or I don't know, like take a picture on a mountain or something like really cool. Like I'm like, man, how do these people get these pictures and take these trips and do all these things? But I mean, look, that's not the reality of my life. So if I want to post and do this whole creative outlet for myself, then I don't have those moments. I live a very structured life. I work out and I work from home. So I'm not even, unless I'm on a trip for work, I'm not even out and about into beautiful spaces. And then I've got 2 little kids. It's like I don't have I have no choice but to put out there the real stuff, or else I wouldn't post.
Man, I love that. Andrea Smith here with me today, speaking on being a fitness instructor of over 15 years, as well as working with body armor and other things that you've done. Let's get into body armor, because I've
Yeah.
had the opportunity to work with them on certain projects over the last couple of years. I love what they bring to the table, and I am a fiend for strawberry banana more than anything else. So I'd love to get your thoughts on body armor and why that is an element of your world that you like including.
Well, I'll tell you a story. Over 8 years ago, I had worked for another brand that this specific person has created. So he was actually the founder of Vitamin Water too back in the day, and I lived in Miami. I used to work on that brand down there, and Coca-Cola bought that brand also. And eventually, people were laid off and or rolled into the Coca-Cola system. And I just remember I eventually got laid off, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I was just wanted to work for this group of people again. Like, we had a lot of fun together. We were young, late 20s, just we had a blast. And Body Armor came out, but it wasn't in my market at all, in the Southeast at all. And
Yeah.
so, probably 6 months before they were ready to launch down here, I started hounding the director of marketing, this guy named Michael Fideli, who has won tons of awards in the body armor world, in a sense, moving on this next year. But I probably called him 1,000 times, and I was like, Mike, if you're ready to hire somebody in Florida or wherever, like, I'm your girl. And it so happened that they had just found out that Publix was going to take them in, which is the big grocer down here in the Southeast. And once they knew that Publix would take them in and put them on the shelf the following year, they were ready to hire. So I actually was the first person hired for the whole Southeast. And this is when, the company had 30 employees. They were only available in certain states. I mean, I had never even tried body armor, but I wanted to work with these people. And Mike Rapoli is the founder, and he always says it's always people and brand. And if you can get the right people, and the brand has some magic to it, you're gonna make it happen. And that's really what I believe has been the thing for body armor. I mean, it's been by far the best experience of my career, the hardest experience of my career, the most work of my career. But man, to cross this finish line and then have the connection that we've had with Kobe Bryant and that family and the many athletes, honestly, that have supported body armor over the years during the launching phases. I mean, it's incredible what has happened with this brand. Like I said, 8 years ago, wasn't even available in Florida, Georgia, anywhere like that. So it's crazy.
You bring up Florida. It's the second home. It's my second home personally, and it's also the second home of my show, Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. A lot of work that we've done with UCF, South
Yeah,
Florida, as well as Miami, Florida State, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Orlando Magic, the
yeah.
Dolphins, the Bucks. So, what do you love most about Florida? And kind of describe your nook of Florida, because there's different personalities in different parts of Florida.
Yeah, I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, which is the northern part of Florida if you're not familiar with the state. And my family's here, my husband's family's here. I have lived down closer to Miami, so Palm Beach County area at times. And I will tell you that for the most part, my whole life, I've lived on the east coast of Florida. So whether either north or the furthest south you can go. I never have lived on the west side of Florida, but I vacationed there before, and it's very nice. Listen, I at this stage in politics, even, and it seems like Florida is the place to be for many. The state itself is flooded. We built a new home last year, and our entire neighborhood pretty much is either from New York or California or outside states, people flocking to kind of come to Florida. And I think that was always the case. I really do, because of the climate situation. Always had snowbirds and all that, but I definitely think now, I mean, love him or hate him, Governor DeSantis has really drawn people to want to move here. So it's an interesting time to be here, especially if you're a homeowner, because your property value is quite high. But I personally, I mean, I love Florida. There's nowhere else I would rather want to live. I mean, and I would love to have places. I mean, I love Atlanta. I love the architecture of places like that, that have basements. I would love a basement. But I gotta say, to live close to the beach on whatever coast you live on of the state of Florida is pretty good. And plus, we got a ton of golf and all the things.
Yeah, no, there's there's a lot of reasons why Florida makes sense. And you touched on a lot of those as well. And growing up in the North, Wegmans, Publix is the
Yeah.
closest thing to a Wegmans
Yes.
that we have. So before I let you go, speaking here with Andrea Smith, and Andrea, you've painted a picture about a lot of different things. Getting back to the positivity of it all and the faith of it all, you've shared faith, you've shared words of that in today's world. I find that, I mean, I've always been a person of faith. I've always believed in God. It's the centerpiece of everything that I do. It's who I am. Growing up as a kid, if you didn't believe in God, you got like smacked in the back of the head. Now, in my 30s, if you don't believe in God, it's like more of the cool thing to do. So the world's kind of gotten a little bit strange and interesting for me to see, but I'm not afraid to talk about faith, and I'm not afraid to put it out there. You haven't been either, and it's something I respect. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's funny. I think people should believe whatever they want to believe and do what they want to do. And I think that the biggest problem that we have in this world we're living in these days is that if you don't believe in what somebody else believes, it's considered wrong, and I guess to your point, it was also wrong back when you were a child in that sense too. However, I don't think that I think that faith-based learning and faith-based belief systems, whatever you believe in, is the answer in a lot of ways for the youth and where we're at with children today. Because I think that from a moral perspective, we're a busy family. We're not at church every Sunday by any means. But do we have beliefs, and do we feel like that we are just as valuable as somebody that goes to church every Sunday? Sure. I think it's about the way you live your life, and
Yeah.
believing that there is a higher power and that there is somebody who sees the bigger picture for you. So even on that bad day or that bad circumstance, that everything is going to turn around, whether it's God or whether it's spiritual, or just being spiritual as a whole. I think that, but I do think from a moral perspective that kids not learning about God and things like that, I think that it is hindering some of our right and wrong kind of attitudes and behaviors in children. So, I mean, I am not a holier than thou, and I am not the type of person to push anything on anyone. But I do think that, back when you and I probably were kids, there was much more of a moral standard towards, going to church and the things that you learned in Sunday school, those types of things. I think that that really does pave the way as a moral standard. And I think that we're probably lacking that a little bit these days, and not teaching children a little bit more about that kind of thing, because I think it gives them something to feel good about.
Yeah, man. I think that I always tell people, if you think that all this stuff happened by coincidence and by accident, it's kind of crazy to think that.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the universe in general. I'm a big believer in what you put out there is going to come back to you, and you know, manifesting. And I'm also a big believer in hard work. Obviously, that is my motto: is don't talk about it, be about it. Like that is my number one life motto. Is if you're going to sit around and talk about what you want to do, but you're not putting in forth any effort to make that happen, it's not going to happen for you. It's not going to fall in your lap. It's not going to be this thing that's like, oh, I just got rich, or I just did this great thing and I didn't have to do anything for it. That's not how this is going to happen. But I do believe that if you put it out there and you put forth the effort you're in a better standing than someone who's not doing that. That's for sure.
Yeah, I've always been a person that believes, I believe in God, and then you put the
Yeah.
work. You can't just believe in God and sit, and you can't put
Right.
the work in and
Right.
have no vision. You got to have both.
Right. That's really my thing too with the God stuff, is like, that's why I say believe what you want to believe, but make sure you believe in something. You know what I mean? Because you can't just believe in God and pray, but also put no forth effort to what you want to happen. You've got to also put in the manifesting, put in the power into what you want to happen. And then you know what? God's going to give you what you need. Maybe it's not what you want, but it's going to be what you need.
Absolutely. And before we get to a special part of the show that we've done for years on Wake Up Call called Rapid Fire, where you get to put me on the hot seat since I have been the one asking questions. Before we get to that, Andrea, for you, as you look at this positivity, what has been a moment or two of adversity in your life that you felt like were crossroads or turning points where you felt challenged most, that you look back on today and say, thank God I had the faith, the hard work, the dedication, determination, the perseverance to be where I am today?
One would be when I moved to South Florida. I was kind of in and out of marketing jobs, public relations jobs in Jacksonville, bartending a little on the side, and something in me just knew that where I was going was not the right direction. And I met a woman at a bar, believe it or not, who was the mother of someone that I knew. And one day she called me out of the blue and says, why are you not working in your field or doing this, doing that? And we have a job down in South Florida that I think you would be great for. And 10 days later, I moved, and I'm an only child. I have a hard time. I was living at home with my parents at the time. I mean, I was not the person trying to get away from their parents. I was the opposite. I was like, hey, I'll just live here forever. I'm comfortable and it's free, you know?
Yeah.
But I will tell you that one leap of faith, taking that job, was what got me to work in the beverage industry down the road. Once I was in Miami, that opened up all the doors for me. I got into the beverage industry. I met the people I needed to meet to work for Body Armor. I made a huge cash out on Body Armor when it was purchased by Coca-Cola. I mean, everything is the catalyst to me moving that and taking that job. And then the second thing was, this is something for another day, but I was carjacked when I was young and kidnapped, taken on a little trip around the town. And it's funny because I tell the story very funny,
Yeah.
but it was very traumatic. I was 18 years old. That night when this happened, though, I kind of made a decision that night that I was going to talk this guy off the ledge. Literally, I was going to talk to him like he was a real person and treat him with respect. And I was just going to see if that was going to get me out of it. Otherwise, I felt I was going to die. So what did I have to lose? And I remember that night, I I spoke to that man and asked if he had children. And when I did do that, he said yes. And when I did do that, he said, but well, I'll put it this way. By the end of the night, he said he'd wish that he had met me under different circumstances. So he let me go unharmed that evening. And I had probably been in that car for 5 hours. And, I used to watch a lot of shows back in the day, and Oprah was one that would say, if you get into the car with someone, if you get into that car, you're never getting out. And I always say that was the moment that I realized that, you know what? From a persuasive perspective and from a communications perspective, which is what I went to school for, you can talk people into almost anything if you speak to them with respect and treat them like they matter. And I live to tell the tale.
Well, that
That's not where you expected this story to go.
no, but it's incredible, and it's you telling me, and I appreciate you sharing that, and I appreciate the fact of what you did and believing in yourself and believing in something bigger than yourself
Yeah.
in that moment, to fight the way that you fought and to respect someone who didn't respect you.
Right.
And you and I hopefully will have plenty more conversations. I had dated someone that in college, and I think I've told the story somewhat on the show before, but in college I was probably around 19 years old. And I tell it as a joke as well. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
stand-up stuff that I do, so there's a funny component, but it was the one time in my life where I looked into the eyes of a human being, saw them turn black, and really felt for that night that I was going to die. And
Yeah.
dating someone who in that moment wanted to kill you,
Yeah.
and then driving in my car halfway home, calling home because I'm an only child as well,
Yeah.
and calling home at 11 o'clock at night and talking to my mom and never forgetting where I was when I made that phone call, and how there was 2.5 minutes of my life that night where I thought to myself, this is how I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And to get out of that and to be here today, it took a year. And somebody looked at me and they said, you're a victim of domestic violence. And I said, no, I'm not. And they said, why not? I said, because I'm a man. And
Yeah.
that's what we've been conditioned to think.
Yeah.
But going back to that, everything about that night was crazy. And 15 years later, that person reached out to me and I talked to them about that. And they're like, wow, I didn't even remember that happened. Why, that's sad. That's the only thing you remember. And I said, how could you forget that?
Yeah.
They kind of treated it like, oh, we went and got a sandwich together. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
but there's things that I think in everybody's life that I think everybody that tries to be an inspiration at some point in our life, we went through tragedy. And so I appreciate and
Yes.
respect that. But I'm not surprised knowing that we are both positive people that are trying to help other people. And normally we have a story to tell.
Yeah, there's a saying actually that's like, what does it take for somebody to shine? And it's a shitload of darkness, and it makes sense. It's you've had a lot of trauma, but you can tell the story to enlighten other people. And, it doesn't mean you didn't go through your own healing to
Yeah.
get to that point, and people forget that.
So the final part here, rapid fire. You've been great about answering my questions. Andrea Smith here with me, fitness professional, and doing a ton of great work in the positive world, marketing manager as well, working with Body Armor. A lot of great things that you do. And of course, on social media, you know her as Mrs. Fitness Fanatic. So make sure you check that out. You have 3 questions for me in rapid fire. You put me on the hot seat. You get to host the show for the next 3 questions. What do you got?
How'd you get started with a podcast?
So when I was 5 years old, you probably know what this is. Some people may not. I have it in my office to this day. My dad had a word processor, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a glorified typewriter with a little tiny screen. She could actually see what you're writing and you could back up on it. And at 5 years old, I started writing stories because I've always had a big imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized collecting cards, photographic memory. So I'd collect the cards, I'd flip it over to the back, not even realize I was taking all the information in. So I said, I like to tell stories. I like to make people laugh. I like to see people happy. I love sports. I can memorize this stuff. And I just was like, you know what? There's a lot of things that I want to do, but on my ring, and I don't know how well you can see it in the screen here, but there's a feather pen that's right in the middle of it.
Oh,
And
cool.
the reason why that's there is whether it's stand-up comedy, sportscasting, screenwriting, songwriting, anything that I've done, it's all started with a pen and a piece of paper. So I got into it because I wanted to be a storyteller. I worked at traditional radio. I worked with 3 ESPN affiliates. I worked with Fox Online. I worked with a Yahoo affiliate. And at 26 years old, I realized that morality, doing things the right way, being in the media, there's a way to go about things that a lot of people don't do in the media. Basically, if you believe in God and you want to be honest and moral, that's not that you don't really have a spot in the media.
Right.
And so I realized that if I wanted to do it, I needed to do it on my own. I needed to pave the way for other people. Started my company at 26. I was a sports caster. Now there's an entertainment show, a Disney show, a sports show, a traveling show, and there's like master of ceremony stuff that we get to do and everything else that's a part of it. 20 different jobs helping people market, produce, direct, put things together, public relations, and wearing 20 different hats now, it would probably be an understatement, but it all started climbing up on the kitchen table, typing on a word processor at 5 years old.
I love it. I love it. I started in radio too. A story for another day. What is your favorite NFL team?
Jacksonville Jaguars. So,
Really?
yeah, it's been the Jaguars forever. So, 1995, when they came
Yeah.
out, I loved the logo and I've always loved it. Love the colors, and the teal is like my grandma's color.
Yeah.
So, I just felt drawn to the team for whatever reason, and big Fred Taylor fan.
Yeah.
Always my favorite. And yeah, and then my first NFL game was crazy. I'd never been to one as a fan. My first game was credentialed for the Jaguars. So I got to go to the game, sit in the press box, have free parking, get food, and then go interview the players on my favorite team. And that was my first experience of the NFL, which was
That's
insane.
fantastic.
And I've been a Jaguar fan forever. I love Jacksonville. I'm 12 years now coming down for I travel back and forth for all the home games and playoffs and whatnot. So got some big games coming up and hopefully some good stuff. I said 7-10 this year. I'd be happy with it. So we'll see where we end
Well,
up. But yeah,
I'll have to go to a game and catch up with you then sometime. I haven't been to a game in like a year and a half, just life reasons, but I'll have to catch up with you in it for a game sometime then.
yeah, you definitely have to go. Very,
Uh,
very good atmosphere, good games.
yeah, for sure. I used to go quite a bit when I was younger. Okay, last thing. Let's see. What's your favorite type of music?
So it's a cross. So when I'm singing or writing, it's probably country, R&B, classic rock, somewhere within that world. I've always lived in the R&B classic rock world, but
Okay.
the country world comes into. I'm also a fan of hip hop, but real hip hop, not gangster rap, like genuinely good lyricists. So I grew up spoiled. I grew up with what, LL Cool J, Tupac, Biggie,
So did I. Yeah,
Run
totally.
DMC.
Okay, so one more then. Tupac or Biggie?
It's got, you know what? I was always a Bad Boy Records guy, so it's got to be
Mm.
Biggie.
Yeah, it's hard because I feel like I could rap both albums from those decades. Like that Life After Death album, I feel like I could do the whole thing myself on a karaoke machine. But I'm a mega Tupac fan too, so it's like I could never choose between the two.
Yeah, I liked Tupac like toward the end of his life.
Yeah,
I've always been a Mace fan, so
yeah,
Mace and Diddy connect you to Biggie,
yeah.
and to this day, probably one of my top five, top three songs of all time is "More Money, More Problems." So
Oh, me too. You know, if you haven't seen this, there's a not a podcast. There's a documentary Diddy did on his when he got everybody back together tour. I want to say it's on Netflix, but if you loved that era of life, it
yeah.
is amazing because there's just every single Mace, Little Kim, they're all on it trying to put this show together to perform on Biggie's birthday in New York. It's pretty cool.
And I remember it was a couple of years ago that Diddy got on stage and Mace came out, and
Yeah,
they were wearing those like space looking
yeah,
suits.
the big suits. Yeah,
And he did I used to do the shoulder shrug, the move as smooth as Bugsy, and he got out there and he started doing it, and I called up my buddy who's a big Diddy fan and I was a Mace fan, and we loved them both, and I was like, dude, I'm gonna lose it, like I'm gonna pass out in my own house, like I'm at the concert, like I
yeah.
never thought I'd see them together again. So
Yeah. It's you should check that out if you haven't seen the Netflix thing because
that
it's really cool.
So that coming from Andrea Smith, bringing some positivity to you as we always do on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Andrea, always a pleasure to be able to connect with you. Happy we finally got to do it on the show and looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.